Welcome to How to Live Slow, the podcast where we discuss slow living for the modern woman and help you design an intentionally slower family life. I'm Rachelle Glendon, your personal slow living coach and host of this podcast. I know all about busy, but I love living slow. Enjoy the show. Well, hello and welcome back to episode 68 of the How to Live Slow podcast, where we're going to be talking about getting your hormones sorted with the Fertility Awareness Method with my beautiful guest, Hannah from the Body Bluprint. Hannah is a certified fertility awareness educator, a body literacy warrior, and incredible proud mama and wife. She fell into charting her cycles when she experienced a 4-year journey with infertility. Through that time, she went through, the gamut of treatments and saw doctor after doctor, but was, unable to, progress with a pregnancy until she discovered the Fertility Awareness Method. Using the Fertility Awareness Method, she began to change things for herself, uncovered multiple hormonal issues, and was able to advocate for her own health and conceive naturally. So, of course, with such an extraordinary story, she has gone on to become Certified Fertility Awareness Method Educator and is now so passionate about teaching us all about the signs and symptoms of our body and the power of understanding our hormonal and fertility cycles. It's also really closely linked with the sustainability of our planet because we talk about, endocrine disruptors or different beauty products and things that we could really do without, not only on our skin, which is influencing our hormones, but also that the planet doesn't really need either. So when we take care of our own bodies and we put our own health first and be really mindful of what's going in and on our bodies, we begin to take more care of the planet as well. So it really is a very wide-ranging conversation, and I'm very privileged to have such beautiful guests on my podcast talking about the things that they're most passionate about. So I know you're really going to enjoy this chat with Hannah. But before we meet Hannah, I just want to let you know that the slow guides on my website is all up and running. Everything is hitting full steam ahead. You'll be able to see on there that there's a range of guides, and I've made these specifically to target particular areas of your day that I know that mothers struggle mostly with when it comes to wanting to slow down and have that really nice, nourishing, connected relationship and feel good about how we're showing up as mothers. But there are certain times of the day, particularly like getting out the door, which is why I created the Time Abundant Mornings guide, nighttime routines and things like that. So that's why I've got my guide to creating family rituals. And there's the work from home guide, which is all about figuring out how to get into work-life flow so that you're not splitting yourself up into all these multiple different hats that we have to wear as mums, so that we can become one person who doesn't need to constantly be changing, the metaphorical hats every time someone new needs us for some other task. So that's why I created my slow guide to working from home. It's all designed to help you get into the mindset and the practical tools of being the one person and getting everything done that you need to get done at work, while also being the best mum that you can be, particularly when you work from home, whether it's from, you already work from home or you're in lockdown, whatever scenario it is, these tips and tools and strategies will really help you to feel good about the way that you're performing all of those roles. So I would love you to check it out. Slow Guides is on my website now. It's howtoliveslow.com/slow guides, and you can have a look there. There's 4 or 5 of them there available, and there's a couple of free ones for you to get started with as well. So enjoy those and let's meet Hannah. Hi, Hannah. Thanks so much for joining us today. How are you?
I'm so good, thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
It's great. I can't wait to chat with you today, as always. Tell us a little bit about you and how you came to be doing what you're doing so that we get into that.
Yeah, sure. It's a bit of a long story, but I guess I fell into charting or the Fertility Awareness Method in about 2014. So my husband and I got married and we decided we'd start trying for a baby and started that fun process. And, I sort of went into trying for a baby with no sort of thought that anything would go wrong, because why would I have any reason for it to? My mum sort of only had to look at dad and she was pregnant, and both of my sisters both had children. So, there was no history of infertility issues or fertility struggles in my family. So I started trying to have a baby, and at about the 6-month mark or so, I sort of went, hang on, what's going on here? Why isn't it happening for me? And I'm a bit of a type A personality, so I've got to, know the ins and outs of everything. So I started to research and started to really understand how fascinating the woman's body was. And at about the 12-month mark, I decided, no, that's it. I'm going to go see a doctor. I went to the doctor and the doctor said to me, look, no, you're young and healthy. There's nothing wrong with you. Come back in 3 years and we'll chat to you then. And I thought, yeah, no, that's not going to happen. So I went and saw a holistic practitioner who introduced me to charting, and I was just blown away at the amount of things I was able to learn about my body and understand about my hormones, but also the things that I didn't know as a woman. And so we uncovered a heap of hormonal issues that was going on, and we started to really work hard on repairing them. And we were able to see a lot of those hormonal issues in my charts when I was charting. So I was really fascinated by it all. It was a bit of a windy road for us. I went through some IVF and IUIs that weren't successful, but then ultimately I conceived naturally using the fertility awareness method because I was able to identify when I was fertile and conceive consciously, I guess. So I had my beautiful boy Nash, sort of waded through the whole newborn period and was trying to work out what it was that I wanted to do. And that always really stuck in my mind, that it was something that I was passionate about and that I often got asked about, can you help me to understand my hormones and my cycles and to help me get pregnant? So it was something I was already sort of unofficially helping people with, and I decided it was time to become accredited and become a fertility awareness educator. So that's kind of a very short story of how I got to where I am. But yeah, that's how I now help women to understand their hormones and their fertility to either achieve pregnancy or avoid pregnancy.
Amazing. Yeah. Oh, first of all, come back in 3 years, far out.
Yeah. Imagine if I had it. I often say that to my clients, like, we have this ability to really, I guess it's like a gut instinct. We're all born with it, but I guess we lose touch with it. But there was something telling me that it wasn't right. And I'm so glad that I didn't listen to her. And I kept sort of at it like a savage beast until I got the answers that I wanted. But, I wasn't going to take no for an answer. I wasn't going to come back in 3 years. Definitely not. And I'm so glad that I didn't.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you didn't either. Imagine the heartache.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about the fertility awareness method. And I'm really interested to know, like, what were some of the symptoms that you saw that were reflected in your hormone levels and things like that as well?
Yeah, right. Yep. So the fertility awareness method essentially is, it sounds very technical, but really what it is it's all based on science and biology of the human body. So the way our body is supposed to function each and every month, it's about understanding at a really deep level so that you're able to understand when you're fertile and when you're not fertile. We're only fertile for a very small window of time each cycle, contrary to what we're led to believe in our high school sex education. So it's about really understanding that at the core and then leveraging that information to either achieve pregnancy or avoid it. So with me personally, we were able to see that, first of all, had really long cycles. So that was odd, and it didn't fit the picture of what was a typical healthy cycle. I had lots of hormonal issues, like lots of acne, weight gain around my waist, like lots of things that led us to believe that there could have been some sort of hormonal issue going on. I didn't think any of that was abnormal, though, because I had no idea about it. It wasn't until I was seeing somebody that was educated about that stuff and started to teach me how to chart my cycles that I was able to see that. Also, things like when we were using the charting or the fertility awareness method, we were able to see that I had a really low temperature all the time. So that's indicative of your thyroid health. So there was a lot of things that were creating this picture of my hormonal health that we're able to see without even getting the testing to confirm that. So yeah, that was sort of the things that we were able to see.
Wow. Really fascinating. So, I mean, I've tracked my cycle for a long time, not being on the pill or anything like that, just to, partly to stay not pregnant.
Amazing.
Yeah, but also to get pregnant. But yeah. I've noticed that things have changed, after I had each kid, took a little while for things to come back to normal. Mm-hmm. And the main time that I wasn't really sure of what to do was those months when I didn't get my period back while I was breastfeeding.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things, like, if you don't have a period in that instance, or, what are things that you can look at that's just not ovulation and period that can help you to learn, where your body's at?
Yeah. So I guess the thing that I often say to my clients is that period where you're breastfeeding, like post having a bub,
Yeah.
you're creating lots of prolactin, which is suppressing ovulation from occurring. So that's why you're not typically experiencing that a cycle within that time. So as you know, and that's dependent, how much prolactin you're producing is dependent on how much you're breastfeeding. So there's so many variables in there as well. And then there's the whole part of like the actual physical effects of having a baby can change things and make cycles different as well as you're coming out the other side of into that postpartum period. The beauty of practicing the fertility awareness method and really understanding the data that you're collecting and what that means for you hormonally is that you're able to really understand what fits in that normal realm, the realms of normal. And I use my inverted commas when I say normal.
Yeah.
But, you know, what fits within the realms of normal and what doesn't. So, you know, looking out for lots of different physical signs and symptoms. So whether that's, you know, acne or hair growth or weight gain, the emotional side of things, you know, the length of your cycles, they can be all really big indicators that you can have some sort of hormonal imbalance. But when it's sort of, I always say that with a bit of caution, because if you are breastfeeding, there's always going to be that not always, but there usually is some level of abnormality, again using the inverted commas, when you're breastfeeding or when you're in that postpartum period, just because of those extra hormones that are in play at that time.
Yeah, makes sense. So you still got to be careful. You're not definitely
Absolutely
not going to get pregnant.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest things to remember is that you've got to look at it almost like a really long pre-ovulatory phase. So you have to first ovulate before you'll get a true menstruation. But if you ovulate, you can fall pregnant. So it's really important to be very careful in that period, that postpartum period, because it's looked at really as a really long pre-ovulatory phase. So your body's basically, your ovulation is suppressed because of that prolactin. But as you start to introduce the baby to supplemental feeding or perhaps going into solids and things like that, the prolactin levels are going to change, and then that could trigger ovulation to occur, and then that's when pregnancy can occur. So it's really in those periods, it's really key to be looking at key markers of fertility like your cervical mucus, because that's giving you a real-time observation of what's happening with your hormones and how fertile you're likely to be at that point as well.
Right, and it can be so different for everyone, right?
Absolutely, yeah. No one-size-fits-all approach with us women.
This is some of the things that you were saying as symptoms then, like weight gain, hair issues, skin issues and things. We're so conditioned to think of those as just things that are wrong with us that it's actually, they're signs, right? If we look at that and go, well, okay, this is a sign that something's not right, that I've got to take care of myself.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate too, because the world we live in today, it's such a band-aid approach to everything, to health in general. So, you know, the amount of times that prior to me, and I look back into my history now and I see the signs, the writing was on the wall. I remember going to a doctor maybe 3 years before I started to try for a baby, and I had horrible migraines. And I was on the pill at the time, and I now, as a fertility awareness educator, understand how that could have been a really different outcome had I not stopped the pill. But I was getting horrible migraines. I went to the doctor and he did not question the pill at all. He just said, here's another medication that's going to take those away. So there wasn't any further investigation as to, okay, well, what's the root cause? Why is this 25-year-old girl getting migraines all of the time? What's going on hormonally? So, yeah, unfortunately, there is that band-aid approach, and we're sort of, in some ways, we're taught to think that all of these things are, in one way, it's just a normal part, but then in some other ways, it's seen as, like there's something. It's funny the way it's looked at. It really is in terms of modern medicine, and I'd love to see more of a holistic approach and less of a band-aid approach to things like that.
Yeah, that's right. And particularly when it comes to things like weight or appearance, where it's like, well, you're not trying hard enough.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. And when you understand all of the hormones that are at play and how they can affect women, it really, really makes you change your perspective on a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you figure out, well, with migraines particularly, because I know, you know, we have a lot of people who get migraines that listen, like me, not so much anymore. But I know that that's one thing that a lot of mums mention to me is like these constant, like, more than a headache kind of thing where you feel physically sick as well. And that's hormonally related. Is that related to anything specifically, or is it just, it can
It can depend. It can be related to so many things. But with me particularly, it was we figured out that it was related to the polycystic ovarian syndrome that I had. So just in regards to the massive fluctuation of hormones that I was having, and at certain parts of my cycle. And through seeing a naturopath and a herbalist, I've had all of mine. I manage mine completely now. I don't have any issues whatsoever with regards to any of those symptoms that I was having. So I was able to get to the root cause of what was going on and really help to improve that through the supplementation and through the herbs, but also through lifestyle changes and dietary changes as well. So it really does come back to that holistic approach, definitely.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so what sort of lifestyle and I'm assuming they're just all the usual things that they're easy to do, but we never do them.
Yeah.
In terms of lifestyle and dietary changes.
Yeah, especially trying to live in touch with your cycle and that sort of thing as well. It's important to be really respectful of that and understand that each woman is very different. But a lot of the things that were right for me and what was my root cause was, cutting out dairy. And for me, it's not cutting out dairy entirely. I have changed to A2 dairy, and that's made a massive difference in terms of acne and hirsutism, which is hair growth. So that's something that I do. Obviously move really regularly, try and get out and do at least half an hour worth of exercise every day, and doing the right kinds of exercise for me and where I'm at in my cycle. And also, taking time out and really focusing on that self-care and that stress reduction, because it's a massive player when it comes to hormonal imbalance, stress and endocrine disruptors and all of that world. I could go on for another whole podcast about endocrine disruptors, but so for me it's been a lot of that, moving my body more, looking at my dietary changes, and a big focus for me has been my endocrine disruptors, which has reduced the stress on my body as well.
I do want to ask you to explain what an endocrine disruptor is, but first of all I just want to interject and say, see, I told you, slow living and rest and living cyclically and being okay with, sometimes you've got energy, sometimes you don't, sometimes you feel like cleaning, sometimes you don't. Nothing wrong with you. We're not 24-hour people as women.
Exactly right. There's an image that I like to show my clients, and I always get a bit of a giggle out of it, but it's basically a graph that has the monthly kind of hormones that happen throughout a woman's cycle versus a man's cycle. Yeah. And you just look at that and you're like, wow. We're so different. We're so cyclical, and we've really lost touch of that. And in this world that we live in now, it's just go, 2 jobs and a business and a toddler and all of this stuff happening. We forget that that's not how we're meant to operate, and it's not conducive to good health. So I love everything that you're doing, because it goes hand in hand with the stuff that I teach my clients.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, a big part of my realization around slow living has been tracking my cycle over the last close to 10 years now. And so that's why probably we're so aligned, really, is that.
And you have that appreciation for you, when certain things are happening within your cycle, you think, oh, what's going on here? But you can kind of bring yourself back to reality in some senses when you chart your cycles, because you can have a look at where you are and understand, that's because of this. So not only does charting your cycle give you so much like a knowledge and understanding of your hormones and your cycle and how it operates, but it gives you almost a sense of calm in a way, because I know that prior to me charting my cycle, I would go to the doctor quite regularly, like, this is happening, what does this mean? Now I've got this sense of, I understand my body and I'm empowered by that. I don't need to be at the doctor every 5 minutes saying what's wrong with me, because I now understand why those things are taking place at that part in my cycle. So there's so much great stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to what I was saying before, like, when you do that and you can see your body as actually working how it's meant to, so we're not, we don't feel like our body's failing us as much. Like, we've got these, there's a reason why you don't have as much energy today. It's not because of anything you've done. It's just part of what having a feminine body is about.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right.
Yeah. So we can be easier on ourselves. But let's go back to the endocrine disruptors, because I would like to quickly just touch on that, because I think that's important to understand for those who don't know, or a reminder.
Yeah, absolutely. So endocrine disruptors are basically things that disrupt the balance of our hormones. So they're in the products that we use in our body, the water that we drink, the food that we eat, the air that we breathe. It's essentially chemicals that mimic our hormones and interfere with their normal function. So I've worked really hard over the last couple of years in transitioning to organic foods wherever I can. So I've got a couple of, great rituals that I have in place now that it just makes it a regular thing that I do. Changing up my body care to natural methods, laundry detergents and all of those things. Unfortunate that it's not something that a lot of people are becoming more aware of it, thankfully, but there's still not enough awareness around it. Yeah, so just artificial fragrances in nearly every single thing that we apply in our body, and, harmful chemicals in deodorants and, any everyday products, it's absolutely everywhere. So it plays a massive role in our hormones, and I saw that progression. You can see it in your charts. Again, when you're charting your cycles, you can see this, particularly when you're taking your temperatures as part of the fertility awareness method. You can see often a crazy kind of pattern going on in your temperatures. And I saw mine as I introduced all of these things gradually, because it takes a lot of time to introduce all of these things. But I saw that even out in my charts, and you can see the results. It's a work in progress. And it's something that I'm often implementing new things. It's still now, even years down the track, and learning more down the track, because things that you think were fine, you go and check them again, check the ingredients, and oh my goodness, that's got, XYZ in it that I shouldn't be having in my body. So it's a minefield, to be honest. It's such a massive topic, and there's a lot of really great people doing some good stuff on it online, on different social media accounts and different influencers and things that are really bringing awareness to it, which is really great.
Yeah, that is really good. Yeah, it just feels like so hard to make changes, but there are a few big key things, right, that you can do, like you said, like beauty products and household cleaners and things that you can switch out that make a big difference.
Yeah, like not ever heating things in plastic. So, trying to, if you can, changing your Tupperware from plastic to glass, but making sure that if you're heating things, you only ever do it in glass. Changing, getting a water filter that filters out a lot of these chemicals that are in our drinking water. Yeah, organic foods wherever you can, really important. But just one thing at a time, because it's really overwhelming and it's expensive to change. It's not probably a good idea to go in and just grab every single thing out of your bathroom and start again, because it's going to cost so much money. But if you can just swap one thing out a week or one thing out every time you do a grocery shop, I definitely find that's the best approach.
Yeah, absolutely. Like just using up what you've got, because otherwise it's a bit as well, like unless you go, maybe not. I don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then the other thing as well is like, you just got to be really aware of like greenwashing. So like when you're in the shopping centre and you're at Coles or Woolworths or wherever you might buy your groceries, being really aware of the marketing tactics that happen as well. So, something might be marketed as organic, but then if you actually read the ingredients on the back, it's not always, a lot of the time whenever it's marketed that way so heavily, that's quite the opposite. So there's a lot of really great apps out there, like Chemical Maze and a couple of other really great apps that help you to check ingredients as well.
Cool. Excellent. Lots of resources in this episode that I will leave all the links to as well in the show notes. So if you want to have a little look at the apps, and we'll put that image of the men's hormonal cycle and the women's one on Instagram as well for you to see, because I think that would be really interesting for people to sort of get a visual. So I just want to go back quickly to, I guess we've sort of talked about this, but I want to go back because I think talking about our bodies and failing or, listening to it, when we feel like we're being hormonal, when someone says, you must be about to get your period because you're cranky or something. When we say that, what do we actually mean? Like what's actually going on? Like, can you just explain a little bit about the hormonal cycle and what's happening at each phase?
Yeah, sure. Yep. So when someone says, I guess, that they're feeling hormonal or feeling really emotional, I guess the key thing to remember there is that we have this massive hormonal symphony going on every single month, and it's just a cyclical process. It all happens and then it starts again. So there's certain parts of the cycle where it's totally normal for you to feel more touchy or more emotional in certain parts of the cycle. And I feel like, again, coming back to like the kind of the world that we live in today, it's almost like, just ignore that, move on. There doesn't seem to be any time for women to just sort of process that anymore, which is a real shame. But when it comes to the actual hormones that are at play, we've got 4 key reproductive hormones that take place during the cycle. So to give you a little overview of that, sort of at the beginning of the cycle, we have the hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, which is released from the brain, and that sort of sends a message to start growing and developing our follicles to grow and mature. So as they grow and mature, we then have estrogen that comes on the scene, and that estrogen starts to increase as those follicles grow and develop towards ovulation. And then around that time of ovulation is a massive influx in hormones. So that estrogen really starts to rise up, which then triggers another hormone called luteinizing hormone to spring into action, and it causes ovulation to take place. And then at that part where ovulation has taken place, we then have, so once it happens, so the little egg releases from the follicle, that follicle then starts to produce progesterone for the remainder of the cycle. So if you haven't become pregnant that cycle, the progesterone then bombs back out, and then the cycle starts again. So it's not like we've just, like men typically just have testosterone pumping the whole way through. They've got other hormones, of course, but that's their main hormone. Whereas you look at us, we've got these 4 hormones all happening like a domino effect each and every cycle.
Right.
So that's why we do tend to be more hormonally, more emotional at certain parts of the cycle. And it's perfectly normal for that sort of week leading up to your period to have more emotions going on and to feel a little bit more, I guess, vulnerable at that part of your cycle.
Yeah, okay. So it's a completely normal thing. We shouldn't be made to feel bad about it.
Yeah. And unless, like I say, unless there's certain parts of your cycle. So everything has like a realm of normal, yeah? So I say, if you're at the beginning of your cycle, if you're midway and you're having all these like horrible emotions and things don't feel right to you, perhaps go and get that checked out by a holistic practitioner. Don't let those kinds of things get out of hand, because it might be a hormonal imbalance that you can get looked at and get back get in check. But that week, sort of, depending on how you look at it in terms of living with your cycle and with the seasons, that kind of autumn phase before we move back into winter, which is menstruation, it's totally normal for that to be to be emotional and to be a little bit harder to cope with everyday things.
Well, that makes me feel a lot better, and hopefully, I hope it helps everyone else to sort of start to see that the body is such a complex and beautiful thing, and that it's not failing us. And if we're getting symptoms, that it's a sign that it's time for us to figure out how to help ourselves, rather than tell ourselves that we're, I don't know, doing something wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, in that part of the cycle, it's about doing more of what reduces your stress, saying no to more stuff. Don't worry about the to-do list, because it's probably not the best part of your cycle to be tackling additional things, and doing more of what brings you rest and relaxation, and prioritizing your sleep, and getting some exercise to increase your endorphins and things like that. So doing things to support your mental health and well-being and those emotions, rather than piling it on.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, if you do those things well, if you rest well and look after yourself in those times, you'll be even more energetic in the other phases of the cycle where you are more energetic.
Absolutely.
So you'll be much more productive in those times, which is very helpful. So if you can plan for that and set your life up, that's cyclical living, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And it really does. It's very beneficial.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things that takes practice, like anything, but it's something that I am really starting to focus on at the moment. So really making sure that I start to take a step back and try to schedule appointments in around the different phases in my cycle where I know that I'm able to take more of those things on. So so that's definitely something that we all could probably do better. Phases of the cycle and that cyclical living is really important.
Yeah, I think so too. It's very good. Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Have you got any final words of wisdoms or things that you felt like I just need to add that because it will help things, or any, that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I guess when it comes to understanding our menstrual cycles and our hormones, one thing that I always try and get across to people is that the word fertility it doesn't mean babies, It's important for all women, no matter what part of your life you're at, to understand your hormones and to ensure that ovulation's taking place if you're in that reproductive part of your life, because it's really important for all women to be functioning properly.
Yeah.
I quite often have women that say, oh, you know, none of this stuff's for me because I'm not trying to have a baby, but it's super, super important to understand our cycles. And I always say that, you know, I use fertility awareness method. If I'm not using it to get pregnant, I'm using it to avoid pregnancy, but I'm always using it to monitor my general health and well-being. And I really think it's something that should be taught to young girls as young as, 13, 14, and really something that should be promoted to all women so that we can really be in touch with who we are and embrace it a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so on board with that it's a sign of our health and where we're at. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. That is actually, I'm really glad that you said that as a final thing because I think that's really important.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining me today. This has been a great chat.
Thanks for having me.
I value, really good. So thank you very much. Yeah, great. Well, I'll leave all the show notes, all the things that we've talked about in the show notes, but do you want to let us know where we can find you online? Because I know everyone's going to be wanting to click over and read a little bit more about what you've got to share.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm on Instagram and Facebook, but I'm definitely more present on Instagram because there's a lot more fun stuff to do on that platform. So I'm at the Body Bluprint _ So there's no E in blueprint. And I also have a website, www.thebodybluprint.com.au.
Wonderful. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
That's it for another episode. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you'd like to connect further, the show notes from today's episode, including all the social links and free resources, are over on my website, howtoliveslow.com/podcast. Have a beautiful week ahead, and I'll speak with you again soon.